Schrefer. Welcome to the show, Eliot.
I am so happy to be here.
I am so happy to have you. This is one of the most fun books I have ever read about science, about nature, about animals, about the human condition. Let's jump straight into it. Queer ducks and other animals. This seems like a joke, and the book is very funny, which is great, but you're learning about a side of the animal kingdom that many people haven't talked about. So let's start with the why. Why did you decide to write a book about queer ducks and other animals?
Yeah, fair enough. I was surprised by the topic too. I come from a background of studying evolution, and I'd always assumed that queer behavior was a sort of dead end for animals.
Yes.
That behaviors that wouldn't cause their genes to propagate into the next generation wouldn't spread. And yet, Nature did a study 3 years ago that put the number at 1,500 species and counting that have significant peer-researched same-sex sexual behavior in the wild. And so the question that was on my mind was why, right? Why is this happening? And the basic version of the story is that we got the story of animal sex wrong, that we think of it as procreation only. That humans, we have a wide variety of reasons for having sex, but animals just dutifully walk up to Noah's Ark in their male-female pairs and they have sex only to have offspring, and then that's the end of the story. When there's actually a wide range of animals with different reasons for having same-sex sexual behaviors.
Yeah, as I read through the book, I mean, my mind was blown by some of the stories you were telling, and I think if we start with it from the angle of, whether it's governments, whether it's churches, whether it's just like society saying we don't want this out there. There were researchers who were discovering this for decades, and they had to hide that research because just people didn't accept it, What do you think has changed in academia? What do you think has changed in the world of science and in research where people are now willing to accept these things and put them out there?
Yeah, well, there's a famous sheep researcher named Valerius Geist who studied bighorn sheep in the 1960s. And at that time, he realized that sheep basically live in a mostly homosexual society. So bighorn sheep there's a male group and a female group. And for most of the year, they're just having sex within those groups. And then they'll come together during the rutting season, and males and females will have sex. But he didn't publish on that finding because in the 1960s, he said later in his memoir, he couldn't conceive of these magnificent beasts as queers, right?
Wow.
He loved this animal and didn't want to propagate this story around the species that he loved so much. And then years later in his memoir, sort of came out about having hidden the same-sex sexual behavior in sheep. And that's kind of a story that goes from animal species to animal species.
Yes.
Even in the 1830s, German entomologists were discovering same-sex sexual behavior in cockchafer beetles, also known as doodlebugs. And that was within the entomology circles. Anyone who knew their bugs was talking about it.
Yes.
But they were also accused of perversion or having an unnatural interest in these animals.
You said cock bugs, and then everyone's brain.
It seems like you basically, by naming it a cockchafer, you've already set up the situation, right? What do you expect to happen?
I'm just saying. You know what makes this book fascinating, and the research behind the book as well, is the fact that for so long people would use, the cudgel they would use against any member of the LGBTQ communities, they would say the same thing. They would go, it's not natural. You cannot be gay, it's not natural. Why wouldn't it be in nature? God didn't create that. And then now the science has shown that it is natural. The irony is then you have people now saying but we're not animals, we're better than them, we're different.
Right.
And what I do enjoy in the book is this. You're really careful to not make it a blanket. You're not saying, hey, we are the same as the animals are the same as us. You're just giving us an insight into a world that we didn't think existed. One of the more fascinating stories, for instance, was the bottleneck dolphins. It feels like a very intentional world that they're living in, that you speak about. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, the bottlenose dolphins were one of my early examples because they are the closest we come to actually having a gay animal. There are some bottlenose dolphin males who only have sex with other males or only here for the males and not the females. But the majority of them are, I guess we would say, bisexual. And basically the spoiler alert is most animals are some version of bisexual.
Oh.
And exclusive homosexual preference is very rare. But there are some dolphins that behave that way.
And is there logic behind it? Because as you said, you study evolution. Why would they do that? Do we have any idea? Does it just hit a brick wall of, they don't want to procreate anymore? Is it just because of pleasure? What are the reasons?
Yeah. So with bottlenose dolphins, the male union is actually the only lasting union within their society. So males and females will come together for a week or two and have sex. The female will go and raise her calf by herself or with other females. But the males bonded through having really frequent sex, like about 2.4 times an hour on average. What sex does is it produces oxytocin, which is known as the bonding hormone.
Right.
And so it's why when you first make out with someone when you're 13, you feel like, I got to spend my life with this person, this is amazing, I love them. You haven't gone crazy, it's just oxytocin is flooding your system for the first time.
I never made out when I was 13.
Oh, that's
yeah, that's
18, 25?
I was just like, wait, first time?
And so they're taking advantage of this to form this intense alliance
Yes.
between the two male dolphins, which gives them power within the dolphin society.
Oh, wow.
So they still have procreative sex with female dolphins, but they're so close together because of this oxytocin rush from all the frequent sex that they are like an intensely strong sexual friendship.
So they found different reasons for the sex. It's almost more intentional. It's almost like that's sort of like you talk about with is it the bonobo monkeys, where they would use orgies to just I guess for stress relief. They're just like, really stressful day, everybody. Pretty much.
Yeah. And the most frequent sexual activity among bonobos is between females. And this animal is tied with chimpanzees as our closest relative. They share 98.7% of their DNA with us. And the females will have sex with males. They'll still have offspring. But they have really, really frequent female-female sex. Mm-hmm. And that produces this oxytocin rush. And it produces a feeling of peace and bonding. So if they introduce a food source, the bonobos won't eat it right away. They'll have sex first so everyone's feeling good with each other.
Okay.
Okay. And when you think of it as like this is our closest relative with the chimps,
yes.
it's kind of a model for how we might be.
I've often thought that. I've often thought if I have sex with all my friends before we eat, people are less likely to fight over who pays the bill.
Have you proposed it?
You're just like, I mean, now that I have the research behind it. Before I let you go, you have I think you have a really beautiful reason that goes beyond the research in writing the book, a personal connection with it. And with what's going on in America right now, I'd love to know how much of that inspired you to write the book.
Yeah. So when I was 11, I realized I was gay. And it was like the moment puberty hit, it was utterly clear. I just lingered over the Fruit of the Loom ads in my brother's Rolling Stone. And I was like, which one do I want to be my special friend? And it was just who I was. But it's surreal if you're not someone who lives this identity. It's surreal because the day before, it was not true. And all of a sudden I was gay, this was in the early 90s. And it was everything I'd heard about it was that it was a terrible thing to be, right? That it was unnatural, there's something wrong with it. And so as a nerdy little kid, which would be no surprise, I went to the encyclopedia and I looked up homosexuality in this 26-volume paper encyclopedia. And the story I got was that it's a psychological aberration unique to humans, caused by too much attachment to mother or father, or maybe too little attachment, no one was quite sure. But something went wrong. And that was a lot to wrestle with. And I came out on the other side of it by sort of loving my gayness, right? I was like, it's unnatural and that's great. Like, who needs natural? Like, this is, who cares, right? Like, we read books, that's not natural and that's fine. Like, this is just who I am. And it would have shortened that journey to self-acceptance, which a lot of LGBTQ kids do not survive, right? It would have shortened that journey to know the research that's in Queer Ducks. And so I wrote it towards that 11-year-old version of me that needed it, which is what makes it so upsetting to see these challenges in schools and libraries now. And I know because I lived that logic. I lived in a purple area in Tampa Bay, and cheerfully in the cafeteria, we would talk about, we should send all the gays to an island to die, right? Like that was just the way we talked about it as middle school kids and high school kids. And they're like, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, right? Yep. Which rhymed, so it had to be true. Like it was like that's like kid logic. And so I understand the thinking, which is basically that. The idea is if you believe that this is an outside source, it's a contagion that comes into people, that they read the wrong book that has a lesbian character in, and now my daughter is going to become a lesbian. If that is truly your belief, then it's also your belief that you can wall it out, right? If in our town there isn't a single book that has a lesbian character, I'm not letting my kid watch TV shows that have them, then it's impossible that she will become a lesbian. And the one thing that's coming out of this, all this abundant research, this explosion of research into same-sex sexual behavior across the animal kingdom, invertebrates, vertebrates, primates, dolphins, fish, is that you can't wall it out because it's coming from inside. It is like, it is our heritage as animals, is to have this as part of us, right? This like huge diversity in the ways to express sex and to be with other organisms. So even if your kid doesn't read a book with a lesbian in it, they come from the natural history of animal kind, and that possibility is in there. Just look at a bonobo or a Japanese macaque monkey or any of it.
But if they do read a book about it, they should definitely read this one.
Oh, that's kind of it.
I really do mean it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you
Such
so
a pleasure.
much.
This was too much fun. I really appreciate it. Clear Dutch is available right now.